So we should have had the Q&A questions for 20 minutes. We have a little bit. We're a little bit running out of schedule. I propose we do at least 10 minutes, and if it's really there are really much questions, we do 20 minutes. Who has a question for one of our three speakers? Yes, Alina, we have questions from live chat.
So we just have a question for Shelby from Lisa. I would like to know specifically what changes you feel that FEI must make.
So one of the frameworks that I think would be really cool to see the FEI start doing is to kind of take a page out of the Jockey Club's book with the equine or the horse injury database and start tracking a whole lot of information pertaining to their shows, tracking horses' average careers, tracking which FEI young horses actually end up having lengthy careers, because then it would give them the information to either prove that their initiatives are working or show that they're not and show them what they need to change. Because, for example, the Jockey Club's injury database, while it's not perfect, they track the footings, they track horses that get injuries on the track, they track which footings are most associated with correlation of injuries, they track the number of doping issues that there are in racing. And I think that even just for a scientific standpoint of getting more information, that would be very valuable. The other thing that I already previously mentioned is that stewards, I think, should be trained how to read equine behavior from an evidence-based standpoint. One thing that I forgot to mention in my discussion that I think is an important takeaway is that the studies that we've seen on rider perception of horse behavior show that even lifelong equestrians, even people at the pinnacle of the sport, aren't particularly accurate at reading horse behavior, and that they oftentimes label stress behaviors as excitement. So one thing that I think is important, because that was something that Bernard, the FEI judge, mentioned about having been in the industry a very long time, years in the industry don't necessarily speak for ability to notice equine pain signals, especially if you're surrounded by horses who are exhibiting them. You're going to start tuning them out at some point. So I think that's also an important takeaway, because years of experience and level of competition is oftentimes used as a source of credibility for people that work with the FEI when there's no evidence that it matters.
Thank you very much, Shelby. Thank you.
Can I add a quick one onto that? Because the FEI do have their endurance database, and they've actually done a lot of work with endurance. So Tim Parkin's group is linked to them, and there's been a lot of changes come through on the back of their work.
It'd be cool.
Thank you.
Jumping and dressage.
Karen, do you want to add something to that?
No, I think
okay.
Shelby answered it really well. The only thing I would say is that I do agree that being an elite rider doesn't necessarily make you an expert in horse welfare. You know, if you're an elite rider, you're an expert in being able to ride a Grand Prix test or get around a 5-star cross-country course, but you're not necessarily an expert in horse welfare. So I think that those two sometimes are conflated.
Oh, okay, thank you very much. Is there another question? Yeah, I have
Jane, thank you very much for this very interesting talk. I especially like it that you mentioned the learning theory. I think it was the first time that it was mentioned in the last 1.5 days, and I think it's really important. And you mentioned the German guidelines. We are from Germany. Our association was part of the group that wrote them, and if it's of any help, we may offer to translate them in English and maybe even in French. So if that's of any help, that's what we can offer.
I think that would be excellent. They are really nice. And I think the more we can have that type of framework available for people to draw upon, the better. So I definitely take you up on your offer. Yeah. I mean, learning theory can be misunderstood like a lot of areas, and it can be poorly applied. But if we look at how we're traditionally taught to led to ride horses and interact with them, a lot of it's based on negative reinforcement. And though we might want to advocate more for positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement used well is absolutely fine. It's how we use it, which is really key. And I think it gets very confused. And I totally understand why. If you're learning to ride and you've got all these things you're trying to do, you're not going to give clear signals to your horse. It's difficult. The good things aren't easy.
Thank you very much. I think Zahir has a question.
It's for Shelby. You've mentioned that actually we've seen pictures of you riding the wrong way round. And how did you, who taught you not to do it? How did you learn? How were you spoken into the right way? You know, you've evolved, so how can we make people evolve the way you have?
For me, a lot of it was getting the right type of horse to make me change, because my horse Milo never went into learned helplessness really. Like, he was very loud with his stress behavior and very difficult to work with. So then that pushed me to start courses at University of Guelph in Ontario through their equine sciences program. And when I started to study equine behavior and learn about pain signals, stress signals, and learning theory, it put me in a position where, in order to continue doing what I was doing, I'd have to basically be aware of the fact that it was wrong and continue doing it anyways. So it would mean that I either have to look at all the information my professors were teaching me and be like, I know better than them, or I had to alter my methods. So that kind of started me on the road of changing things. And then I noticed how well everything I was applying was working. And it led me to changing a lot of things in my care, like including hoof care, their management, along with how I ride. So it's a multifaceted approach. It wasn't just my riding that changed, it was everything, which, like what Jane mentioned with the other 23 hours, I think that was a huge part of it, because I don't think I would have seen the change in my horse if I hadn't changed his other 23 hours.
Thank you very much, Shelby. Other questions? Yes, Crispin, please.
Is this on?
Yes, it's working.
Last night we were talking, some of us, and we actually came into this thing of cognitive dissonance. So I'm really pleased that you took it up today. Karen, my thought was that what you presented, and I may have been not seeing it, but it's very much to do with the individual person. And I think in the horse world we see a lot of the sort of big institutions seem to operate with cognitive dissonance, and I wondered if you have anything to say about that, how that, how the cognitive dissonance in the institutions operates, something like that. I experience it maybe as a bigger problem.
Yeah, I don't know that it's actually typically looked at as as something that happens in institutions. It's more an individual thing. But I sort of feel like maybe we saw a little bit of it this morning, where people were talking about things which maybe they're not aligning. The practices, all of the science that we talked about yesterday talked about how hyperflexion really isn't consistent with horse welfare for various reasons. There's a lot of evidence to suggest that, and yet this morning we were told that maybe it's not so bad, maybe it's the way that it's trained that's the issue. So that to me seems like a bit of cognitive dissonance. But I think what I think is really important, and I think Shelby touched on it, is that what enabled her to change was she had a change of mindset, because it influenced not just how she was riding, but it changed how she did everything with her horse. And I think that to overcome that cognitive dissonance, we do almost need to see a change of mindset where at the organizational level, where we stop sort of saying, well, what degree of hyperflexion is okay? Is it I found it interesting that we were talking about inexperienced riders, yet, the people that we're seeing in the warm-up ring aren't inexperienced riders. These are all professional elite riders. So why are we talking about inexperienced riders? So I think that it really needs a change of mindset to overcome this cognitive dissonance, where we're saying one thing, but really we're practicing something quite different.
Thank you very much, Karen. I would like to add that the excuse of a young horse having difficulties is a very frequently used excuse to let the horses be behind the vertical. I can hear it is difficult, but I think that I don't understand why we see the high-level riders, the best of the world riders, on horses being trained for years by them, still being behind the vertical all the time in their warm-up. There the excuse doesn't hold that the horse is young. And if the horse is too supple, I can hear it too. I know these horses are hyperlax. We know, Karen knows it, she has been working on it. But what Karen said yesterday, that these horses need 2 to 3 years to be fully in capacity to correctly been ridden by a rider without crawling behind the vertical by himself. I hate to say this, sorry. But if this is the case, I can really hear it. But then we shouldn't see them rewarded. This shouldn't be seen in warm-ups of the highest level international dressage competitions. Yes, I think we have just a question from the live stream, and then we'll try, and then I think we will go get a little lunch break. So 2 more questions, and then we'll stop. Thank you.
So we had a question also from Johanna Richardson that is representing the World Bitless Association, which is a legal registered charity in the UK with equal status with the Charities Commission as World Horse Welfare. And the question are based on evidence and on the outstanding request to the FEI to allow bit-free alongside bitted bridles in all FEI horse sport. So Johanna wants to also pass that she thanks FEI for having taken part in this important conference, but she would like to know why bitless bridles are being forbidden, if this could be a choice of the rider.
Yeah, thank you. So Shelby, yeah?
I think that the ban comes from a lot of fear from riders because people view the equipment that they use as a safeguard against dangerous behavior, which it definitely can be, but what we need to keep in mind is that behavior is the symptom of an underlying problem. Having a bit might help you control the horse in the moment, but what will actually stop these dangerous behaviors from happening is managing the horse's stress and helping them be relaxed, pain-free, and be able to compete in a way that's not dangerous to the rider as a result. So I would caution like anyone in viewing equipment as a safeguard against like bad behavior of the horses, because ultimately all behavior has an underlying motivation, and I think we're missing the mark if we fixate on equipment used to try to control the horse rather than using what is most ethical. Because I think the other problem too with the bit ban in certain disciplines is if you have a horse that has dental issues or simply cannot be ridden comfortably in the bit, you can't make the best decision for them. And that's really hard because, for example, like my horse, I ride bitless now, so I can't compete him in dressage and get judged properly. Like what I was thinking to potentially use as a loophole was to attach my reins to his cavesson and still have a bit on him, but not have the rein aids be coming to the bit. But like that's a little ridiculous if we have to go to those lengths rather than just being allowed to use a bitless bridle that doesn't use leverage on the face.
Thank you very much, Shelby. Yeah, in the Netherlands it's changing. It's allowed, okay. International also? No, national. Until FEI, okay. Jean-Philippe? The bit, the use of the bit, and the right to not use a bit in competition riding. Dressage competition, sorry.
You remember? Just about bit or unless bit rotor. You remember what I said this morning? 45,000 horses on the data FEI, able to compete on the FEI around the world, 137 national federation. I promise you, if tomorrow FEI say, okay, no problem, you can ride with a simple link around the neck, I promise you, we probably have a lot of very bad pictures, not systematic of the horse, but riders fall, crash, horse on the fence, etc. Because, unfortunately...
It's not about the rope, it's about the bitless bridle. It's not at all the same thing. Thank you.
Listen. To control a 600 kilo or 500 kilo of muscle, with a speed of 42 kilometers per hour in the front of the cross-country fence.
I think it's more like for dressage and...
No.
Yeah. The question is for all disciplines. Okay, sorry.
For all the discipline. FEI decide, like Fédération Internationale Automobile decide, it's important due to the quality, due to the difficulty of the sport today. We talk about sport to avoid a risky behavior of certain rider. If certain rider, I know French rider, we ride a Grand Prix with a simple link, and it's fantastic. I'm very, very impressed. But if we decide as FEI to give the opportunity to compete without beat around the world, it will be potentially a risk for rider and horses to be, honestly, to have the horse out of control in certain level of competition.
Okay.
Just to remember, Cathy Kessner jumped 2.10 m in Aix-la-Chapelle in a year 17 without beat.
Yeah.
We know it's possible. Together, we know that certain horses are extremely well without beat. I ride certain of my horse without beat. But in competition, it's compulsory to use a bit.
Okay, thank you. I think
For
Shelby
the
can-
reason that if we said it's open, certain rider without knowledge, without education level, will be in a very risky attitude, very dangerous
maybe that's the
situation.
big
For the
problem.
rider and for the horse. It's just a security. This question was in a risk management committee in eventing. I was in this risk management committee.
Can we just wrap up because the bit list
Just
is
to
not-
explain
yeah.
why.
Yeah.
The risk management committee in eventing say, no, we can't accept in FEI rules a horse without bit.
Yeah, okay, it's because of the risk. So I think Shelby can
I
just
had
in
some
30
thoughts.
seconds. 30
Yeah.
seconds, please.
Okay, so one, where is the proof that there's more risk riding bitless? Two, if bits are preventing accidents from happening, why do we see so many accidents still happening in FEI eventing and other sports, riders falling off, being endangered, all of which, generally speaking, use bits. Like most of the big accidents we see being shared online have bitted horses. If bits are definitive, let me finish.
Mr. Camboli, please let Shelby finish.
Yeah, I agree that their size is relevant, but what makes them most dangerous is stress. That's what the studies show. Yeah, I am talking about
Yes,
sport.
she is talking about sport. Just
But
let her,
can you let me
please
finish
let her
my
talk.
point
Let
so
her,
that you
please.
can
Thank you.
understand what I'm trying to say. The studies that show horses being dangerous show that stress is a factor. There's studies on bits comparing bits to bitless, and they almost unanimously show that bitted horses are more stressed. And then the other thing to consider is that if a horse is happy or bitless, their rider choosing to ride them in a bit simply so they could compete could add additional risk. So I'm not sold on the risk management component unless there's actual evidence that that's a factor, which I don't believe that there is. And ultimately, in my experience as a rider, the riders who have out-of-control horses who knowingly wouldn't be able to control them at a competition without a bit likely wouldn't choose to do that because it wouldn't be beneficial to them. They're paying thousands of dollars to go to these FEI-sanctioned competitions. Why would they use equipment that's putting them at risk of not pinning in the class? I don't think that's a thing. And if it becomes one, when you change those rules, at that point you could go, okay, dangerous riding, dangerous behavior, kick them out of the ring, excuse them from the show. If they're causing a scene and they're endangering themselves and other riders, whether they're in a bit or a bitless bridle, they shouldn't be actively endangering themselves, horses, and other riders in the ring.
Thank you very much, Shelby. We'll wrap up with this subject. Thank you for having brought it up. It's quite important. Geraldine, 1 minute, and then we will have to. No, I'm sorry. This lady was before you, and we will have to cut short afterwards. But you can keep all your questions for the think tank also at the end of the afternoon. Don't worry, just write it down. Last question, very short, please. Thank you.
Is that on? Yeah. Hello. Sorry, my question might be better for the think tank later, but it just came up now. Just two things. I'm from Australia, just happening to be in Paris. But pleased to be here. One of the things that we are saying that we have in Australia is speak up even if your voice shakes. That's to do with bullying of children, but I think it's really relevant within this environment as well. My voice is shaking a little bit at the moment. But I took on what everyone's saying, FEI level, elite riders, stewards, education. And at Pony Club, we're dealing with kids at the very beginning of their riding career and seeing coaches that are, what you're saying, ignoring what the horses are, you know, showing, teaching riders to use spurs and nose bands and whips and all this sort of thing. This is where it starts, the new education. How do we, or what happens over here, how do we educate the educators? How do we change the coaches, because they are influencing the children and they're the next generation?
Yeah, that's exactly the subject we have treated a month ago with the collective, with a group of riding instructors from France. It was a bit more concentrated on this. Exactly the same thing as I said before. If the FEI wants to do a meeting with the instructors to know how to handle this big problem, they should invite us to do so.